Hi, I'm Malika Bilal.
I'm Ahmed Shabuddin, and you're in the stream.
Today, Vietnamese bloggers under the threat of arrest are using the internet to fuel the country's cries for change. Last week, prominent Vietnamese blogger Nguyen Nhat Nhi Quin, was known by the pen name Mother Mushroom, was arrested and charged with, quote, propagandizing, unquote, against the state. State-run media aired video of the arrest in which authorities rummaged through her home. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, Mother Mushroom faced constant harassment for her work. Most recently, she'd been calling for Vietnam to hold a Taiwanese company accountable for dumping toxic chemicals into Vietnamese waterways. The move led to the devastation of local fishing communities.
State-run media dominates the Vietnamese media landscape, but according to research, more than half of the people in Vietnam consider social media more reliable. And it's social media that's encouraging people to take their protests offline and into the streets. Earlier this month, more than 10,000 people gathered in central Ha Tinh province to protest the Taiwanese company Mother Mushroom blogged about. Protesters are calling for governmental transparency and environmental protection. So what impact will the jailing of Vietnamese bloggers have on political activism in the country? Well, here in our studio to discuss that, we have Dan Wang. He's spokesman for Viet Thanh, a pro-democracy organization.
In Hanoi, Vietnam, Nguyen Chi Tuyen, also known as An Chi, he's a blogger with the website Vietnam Right Now. In Anaheim, California, Nancy Nguyen, an activist and protest organizer. And in Berkeley, California, Brad Adams. He's the executive director of the Asia Division for the Human Rights Watch organization. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now, we did reach out to several members of the Vietnamese government and invited them to participate. However, they didn't respond to our requests. So, Nancy, we'll get started with you. You're familiar with Mother Mushroom and her work online. How significant is her arrest?
So, I'm sorry if I get emotional because I know her a lot too for a while. But so basically, the government wanted to give a clear signal that if the activities going on, it's probably going to be more arrests will come, and basically just want people to stay off the street, and hopefully they'll case, out of fear to case the activity that they carry on right now. And I believe that I don't think they were right.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you might get emotional talking about it. What part strikes you the most? What part strikes that chord?
She is a good friend of mine, and she's a single mom of two little kids and a very old mother.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can relate?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, kind of.
Mm. Dan, what's the latest with Mother Mushroom's case?
Yeah, so she's been detained for about 10 days. And I think a little background, the reason why she blogs by the name of Mother Mushroom is her daughter is named Mushroom. So she's really identified by her children. I think if we take a step back, I think the context is important. So there have been unprecedented fish kills in Vietnam, an environmental disaster since the end of April. And for the first 2 months, the Vietnamese government kind of tried to sidestep, try to bury the problem, and gave really conflicting answers. And after 2 months, the government acknowledged that a huge steel plant by the Formosa company was responsible, and Formosa took responsibility, and the government announced a settlement. But since then, they've been very non-transparent about the causes of the environmental damage, how the settlement will be taken care of. And as a result, there have been a lot of Vietnamese blogging and speaking out. So that's sort of the background behind some of the arrests recently.
And obviously, there's a vibrant culture of blogging in Vietnam. A lot of people may not know that. I want to point to a tweet that came in from Lan Diep saying to us, the arrest of Vietnamese dissident blogger Mother Mushroom will only embolden other bloggers. Dissidents know what they're facing. An Chi, you're a blogger yourself. Do you know what you're facing? And do you think your peers do as well?
Yes, I know. I know that as you may know, under the communist regime, we are facing risk our lives to do what we want to do in our country. And as you may know, practicing human rights and civil rights, the basic one, can dangerous for our life. Not only ourselves, but our family member.
Dan, you mentioned Formosa and the reason, the cause of what some people are blogging about. Here is actually a statement from Formosa. You did, as you said, they accepted responsibility. Here's a statement. Incidents at Formosa caused fish deaths in the 4 provinces. We accept full responsibility for the incident. We apologize for causing the incident, severely impacting people's lives and the sea and environment. What are people blogging about besides Formosa? This is only one instance. We've seen from other people online that there are other issues that are close to their hearts. Some of them have to do with environment, others have to do with other things. Anchi, what is it that you blog about?
It depends. But recently, Formosa is the most important for us, and it attracts attention from the world about Vietnam. The news from Vietnam. So Formosa is now important, and we usually tweet or post on Facebook, social media about this topic, beside other one.
It's interesting because a lot of the people online are commenting about how there are other priorities that are perhaps being overlooked, but at the same time, Lan Diep again saying Vietnam only joined the modern world 22 years ago after the U.S. ended the trade embargo. Vietnamese people's concerns are economic rather than political. And I'm just curious, Brad, when you hear that, does that ring true to you, just, watching what's happening there? Because, he's certainly not alone. Julia is also saying there are too many people who are well off to protest and are not touched by bloggers' arrests in daily life. Plus, right now, more people are concerned about floods. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's presumptuous for anyone to say what everybody in a country is concerned about. There are many people in Vietnam who are extremely poor and just trying to make ends meet. And of course, they're most interested in getting food on their table every day or health care for their kids. But there are many, many other people who are interested in Vietnam becoming a democracy, that people can speak their minds, that they can choose their government, they can vote in elections, that one-party rule monopoly ends, and that they have the same rights and freedoms that people around the world do. And the thing about the blogger movement is it's a result of the internet and increased access to information around the world. So people are seeing what other people in other countries, including nearby countries, have, and they want the same thing. And I don't see a contradiction between people's economic aspirations and their aspirations for freedoms. These things often go hand in hand, and the more people have freedoms, the more they're able to demand their economic and social rights as well.
And, when you say that, Dan, I have to ask you, because even coming from Brad, but also from Uyen Lu on Twitter, saying the reality is that real-time news caught by man on the street, posted on social media, seems to have more of an impact than any state-run media. Is that true? Is it that absolute?
I think it particularly, I think that's the trend in a lot of places, but particularly in Vietnam, because state media is obviously controlled by the government, it's heavily censored, and people don't feel like it's really covering all the issues of society. And that's why you have such a vibrant citizen journalist movement in Vietnam, and why Facebook is so important. It's like the town square where people can freely exchange ideas.
So there's a tweet here we got that kind of picks up on what you were saying. This is Saigonese, who says, Facebook has become the de facto source for news and public debate. Its impact on Vietnamese society and politics can't be underestimated. Nancy, I'm hoping you can pick up on this tweet and then what Dan was saying about people not trusting state government. Why is that? Where does that mistrust come from? And is Facebook a good alternative for people to be able to get news that they can actually rely on?
I'm glad that you brought this. For the past 40 years, I believe that state-run medias are propaganda. They're not really a channel for news. And we have to look for a way, because news is a basic demand, so we have to look for different means to get our actual news from. And it's come from, of course, online media, like Facebook and Twitters and everything. And it's true for most, country under a dictatorship, especially in Vietnam.
Well, we talk about, especially in Vietnam, under any dictatorship, obviously it's true, as you know, that in many countries where there's a lot of censorship or people don't have freedom of speech, there's a lot of oppression and people feel like they turn to the internet. I just want to show you this one graph. This kind of outlines the specific situation in Vietnam. The total population there, 90 million. Online, there are 45 million people. On Facebook, by comparison, that's 30 million people. Perhaps to a lot of people this might seem surprising for people who don't know a lot about Vietnam, but one person in particular we have who sent us a video about this very issue is Tran. I want you to take a look to what he told us, and then we'll get your response.
If you want to be an independent journalist in Vietnam, you have to be ready for harassment. I myself have to spend 4 years in prison because I just want to exercise my human rights. I have to leave my house for my safety and for my family security. I just want to give an answer. We need justice and democracy. We want to live in a country where we can share our own voice.
You know, Dan, like An Chi, we've heard many people talk about, you know, the risks that they put themselves in, their families in. The government's seeming to equate any form of dissent with essentially terrorism.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think they're going to change their tune on, given the international attention, or no?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's an unfortunate reality when you have a dictatorship that wants to, you know, control all sorts of power, and they view any tiny type of dissent, criticism as, you know, subversive, and that's unfortunate because, you know, how can Vietnamese society advance, progress, you know, solve these big challenges with the environment, with the floods, when, you know, people can't be empowered and can't participate? So I think that's a sad reality right now in Vietnam, but it's not blocking, you know, Vietnamese people from organizing and from being involved.
But how specifically?
can I just,
go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, maybe to help, just to give you an example of what people are up against. Sorry, I'm looking down because I'm going to read. Vietnam's penal code includes crimes related to, in quotes, activities aiming to overthrow the people's administration, up to 15 years in prison or a death sentence. Undermining national unity policy, Article 8057, 15 years in prison. Conducting propaganda against the state of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, up to 20 years. Disrupting security, up to 15 years. And here's a great one: abusing the rights to freedom and democracy to infringe upon the interests of the state, the rights and interests of individuals, up to 7 years in prison. So the things that we take for granted in our daily lives, the you know, basic conversations we're having in the United States, for example, about the election, or in other countries about elections, can lead people to prison for very long periods of time. But it's not only prison. People are harassed at their jobs. Landlords threaten to evict or do evict people who are being harassed by the state. Some people have been sent into exile. Other people are not allowed to leave the country. The kind of things that people like An Chi and other very, very courageous people deal with on a day-to-day basis are really incredible. And so it shows just how important it is for people who take these risks to speak up for democracy and change.
So
And I
An Chi-
have one add-on.
Well, Nancy, I want to hear what you have to say, but because Brad mentioned An Chi, I mean, I have to ask, is coming on today's show something that concerns you? Are you worried for your own safety?
Today, the safety of today. Mm-hmm. Oh, don't worry. When I do, don't worry for me.
I'm not worried for you, and it sounds like you're not worried for you also, which is a good thing. Nancy, did you want to pick up there?
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of people is not aware of is in Vietnam, people can be convicted for intentions-based things, you know. So basically, it's at the majority part of the world, people will be convicted for what they've done. But in Vietnam, they say that any actions against the state, well, you don't need to have the clear action to prove it. If they can say that you have intentions against the state, you can be convicted. So that put a lot of people at risk, you know. So they say that if you have conducted activity and you succeed, then there's no state to put you on trial anymore. So they'll stop you at the state where they think that your intentions is clear enough, and there's no way to say the intention is clear enough or not. It's entirely up to them.
I wanted to touch on sort of the nexus between repression and technology, because there's a very famous picture of An Chi beaten brutally by police with his face bloodied, and obviously that's unacceptable. But after he was attacked by thugs, that picture went viral, and many people on Facebook chose that as their avatar, as a way of showing support for An Chi personally. And so what that says is, yes, activists are being repressed, brutalized, but that's not intimidating a lot of other people, and in fact, that's inspiring a lot of other people. And if you go on the internet now and do a search, let's say on YouTube, for công an đánh người, police beating people, you'll get hundreds and thousands of searches, results of videos. So does that mean police are beating up people more often, or social media is documenting it? It's probably a combination of both.
And Dan, that's not unique to Vietnam, obviously, but one thing that seems to be, at least that our audience is telling us, I mean, you brought up the issue of solidarity and people using that avatar, but it's also true that we've seen a lot of people feeling galvanized, almost empowered by the role that social media has played. Kathy Trieu saying right here, the expanse of social media makes it clearer to Vietnamese citizens how much the government continues to censor. She goes on to say, but the continued arrests of bloggers such as Mother Mushroom also make clear that there is not enough change in the part of the government. When you hear that, not enough change in the part of the government, Nancy, what do you think will need to change specifically, or do you agree that there's not enough change?
Well, I think the change is not enough at this moment, so I agree with that. There's still a lot of oppressions against blogger. And I think that we had to, I don't know if it's going to be right away, but the laws is actually allow them to just arrest anyone. I myself was arrested and for no reason at all. They just burst into the hotels and just, take me away. And the law allow people to allow the police to detain anyone up to 3 years without trial. So that's really bad. If you ask me if the change has been enough, no, it's not enough at all.
Is there anything in particular that you would like to see, one specific thing?
Yeah, so at least for now, I don't think that my colleagues or my friends, activists, would be very afraid of being captured. But I hope that at international, we can raise enough international attention so they won't be beaten in jails and tortures during detentions. I hope so.
I want to share with our audience the picture that you mentioned, Dan, and this is one that went viral. This is from 2015. The headline on this from Radio Free Asia: thugs attack Vietnamese anti-China activists on Hanoi Street. And a picture of you there. Of course, it's hard to see on Chi, but it's because of pictures like this that we're hearing from people in our community who are saying they're being galvanized by things like this. This is a video comment we got from someone who says something to that effect. Have a listen to her.
Resistance is not monolithic, and that is one thing that the internet and social media in Vietnam has really shown us. So you're getting all types of dissent. And especially when the fish crisis broke out, you were seeing overt resistors from video bloggers or people posting protest photos, but you were also seeing people who are tied to the state in some way, posting subtle cries for help or kind of cryptic Facebook posts. And all of these have an important role in building a social movement. So in short, I think that the impact on the democracy movement has been really profound.
Anchi, do you think, as she says, that this is the start of a social movement?
Yeah, yes. I think internet help us so much, and it encourage more and more people to aware about our future, and they have enough courage to raise our voice about everything in Vietnam as much as possible.
So, Brad, do you think that would be enough to sway the government into changing things like this penal code that you brought up? Would mass protests, is that the thing that will do it?
Oh, absolutely. If mass protests happen and are allowed, I think there already is a social movement. It's in its infancy, but it is growing very fast. And I think the day after there is a social explosion in Vietnam, we'll all look back and say, oh, it was obvious. The elements were all there. The repression, the cronyism, the corruption. And I think that's one reason why the Vietnamese government decides sometimes to arrest some people and allow other bloggers to continue, because they know that if they arrest everybody, the pressure inside the system will build up to the point that there will be certainly a social explosion. But I think that the days of one-party states are numbered, and I expect that there will be mass protests that link up from city to city, and this is what the regime is terrified about. They're terrified of successful organizers of mass protests being able to talk between Hanoi and Saigon and other parts of the country and rallying people.
And Brad, obviously that's exactly what the internet does, right? It doesn't just connect people across borders, but even within a country, people who might otherwise not know exactly what's happening in another city. And we were just looking at some of that protest footage, but we have a tweet from VK Tran saying, oppression by the government and reprisals, just highlighting some specific examples of what the government does. Students may get kicked out from universities, workers may lose jobs if they go and protest. And you just said moments ago, if the government allows protests, obviously in the Constitution, that is a right that is protected. Why do you say if they allow it? And do you anticipate that the movement, the social movement that you've described that largely is existing online, will manifest more and more in the streets?
I do think it will. I think that labor unions and workers and students and others are very clear now that they have similar interests, and the internet is what stitches them together. I mean, in the past, it would have been almost impossible for people in different parts of the country to come together and share a common cause and a common political program. I want to emphasize that so far in Vietnam, almost all protests have been entirely peaceful, and almost all violence has come from the state. And that the question is, will the government allow it? Well, the question is, how can they stop it when so many people are calling for change? And I don't think they will be able to succeed.
Yeah, I think these are forms of civil disobedience. What you're seeing from a lot of protests, they're not asking for permission. They know it's their fundamental right, and it's an important issue. And that's why you have these huge sit-ins along the Central Coast around the Formosa plant, and I think that's going to continue. And then, we have this amazing footage of tens of thousands of people protesting because people are using drones. A couple years ago, you didn't have drones, and now they're so cheap and they can get that footage, and immediately, that's uploaded online.
Right.
And so you have the internet. You also, frankly, have a very young population. I strongly believe Vietnam's millennials will be a force for change.
So I'm hearing optimism here, but I want to put this into perspective because Nancy, you were last in Vietnam in May of this year, right? And then,
Yes.
as of now, you're not allowed to go back. Tell us what happened and why.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed or not allowed. It's never explicitly stated. I don't think they have any interest in telling the world whether I'm allowed or not allowed in. So I just want to add a little bit, comments that people thought that the right of protest is there in the constitutions, but funny that in Vietnam the constitution actually said people have the right to protest according to law, and there is no law at this moment. So when they were detained me, they say that, the constitution, yes, you have the right to protest under law, and because there's no law at this moment, you cannot protest. So they say it's illegal activity, though people know that it's their basic right. So that's pretty tricky right there. What happens
On the other
in
hand, Vietnam has signed up to international law, which makes clear the right to peaceful protest, and actually gives a platform for what you said, Nancy, which is to have international institutions, foreign governments, and the United Nations talk about these rights, because Vietnam has willingly agreed to international standards.
It's just interesting. I just can't help but go ahead. I just can't help but think, as you were talking about some of the new kind of advancements that people have now on the street that they didn't have. Viet Tan tweeted us saying Facebook Live specifically is playing a large role in some of these recent protests outside Formosa, because netizens are gaining continuous live broadcasts. For me, at the very least, that's quite reminiscent of just a few years ago in the Arab world, similar issues where people had access to things, as you pointed out, Dan, that they didn't have.
And in the early days, the government, tried to block Facebook, but they failed because many people found ways to circumvent. And a lot of the people who are using Facebook are the children, the grandchildren of, government officials. And eventually, government municipalities have to use Facebook to advertise their services. So it's all intertwined. Obviously, in this day and age, you can't cut off the internet, you can't cut off Facebook. And so Facebook is there to stay. And because of that, the government is evolving the way they repress and silence people. So now they're trying to use online trolls or target specific activists, try to have heavy prison sentences against Mother Mushroom to intimidate people.
So I'm gonna pause you there. We are going to pick up this conversation in the online post show. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We'll continue at stream.aljazeera.com. Now, on a final note, if after watching today's show, the Vietnamese government would still like to respond, we'd be happy to hear that point of view. You know how to reach us. Until next time, we'll see you online. Welcome back. We're in the online post show. We're continuing our discussion on Vietnam. Before we entered into the post show, Dan, you made a point about the government at times when there are mass protests blocking Facebook. It's actually something that people online, of course, are talking about. Here's a tweet that kind of brings it full circle. Raj says, meanwhile, in Vietnam, Facebook has been blocked to curb protests. They didn't learn from the Arab Spring, a point you raised a little bit earlier, Ahmed. This is a tweet from May 15th when Vietnam saw large protests over a plant that was accused of contaminating waters and then admitted guilt of contaminating those waters. And so this is what people did to get around that. You see, this is a hotspot shield, free VPN, and proxy. This is a graph of how usage of VPNs, workarounds, jumped around that time so that people could continue to get online and to use Facebook. Anchi, I know you wanted to get in at the end of that conversation right before we headed into the main show. What did you want to add?
Sorry, I don't understand what you mean.
I know you wanted to make a comment. We were talking about the use of Facebook being blocked when the government wants it to be blocked and then unblocked when they want it unblocked. How easy or difficult does that make life for you living there as a blogger who uses it as a medium to get your message out?
We know that at specific time the government want to block the internet, and so that it makes difficult for us to use media, social media like Facebook or Twitter. But we try to overcome the difficulty it made by the government, and we teach each other how to overcome that difficulty. I think so.
Nancy's smiling there. Could you recognize what does the teaching look like? What are you telling people, Nancy?
Oh, well, I believe that the government would block Facebook in a heartbeat if they can. They have tried many times, legally and illegally. So they have a lot of attempt to ban Facebook. And when they cannot, then they tell the shark. We have a joke, shark beat the cables under the oceans. But they
don't say that, do they?
A lot.
Do they really blame sharks?
Well, they blame undersea cables, having problems and so forth.
But they don't blame sharks. They do? I'm just curious, because oftentimes it's
at one point they did, and then they think it's too big of a joke, so they blame something else.
Right.
But they only blame the cable problem under the oceans, and but then we noticed that the shark only active during protest time or sensitive time around the country. So we know to avoid sharks. We know we like T said, like Auntie said, we teach each other way to jump over proxies and firewalls to make sure that we get the news we need.
But an interesting thing here is that we talked about social movements before. At the essence of a social movement is peaceful civil disobedience, right? And when the government creates these hurdles to get online, it's incentivizing people to practice civil disobedience by using circumvention. And circumvention is almost like the starter drug for civil disobedience of it. Now, many people have been doing that because it's ridiculous not to be online. So they find ways to get around it, they find ways to train their friends, and that will grow into other actions people do because it's in their interest and they feel they have the right to do so.
And Dan, you were talking about the drones and the use of drones, and obviously technology as it's proliferating is helping people who are trying to get their message out. I do want to just draw your attention to this tweet from Viet Tan, again saying, photo from a recent protest outside Formosa where more than 10,000 people participated. They used not just drones, but Facebook Live and drones. And again, it's these kinds of images that the government wants to prevent, from getting out. And on a quick side note, go ahead.
Slightly additional perspective. I think it's important to talk about what people are up against in Vietnam. And the Vietnamese Communist Party has proven to be, I guess, a Marxist, Darwinian capitalist party. So it's got a lot of faces. It started out as Marxist. It's Darwinian in that it keeps trying to change to survive. It doesn't really have any strong beliefs in Marxism anymore. It practices capitalism, state capitalism, crony capitalism. And what people are up against is the fact that Vietnam is now a darling of the international foreign investor community. It's a darling of the World Bank. It's a darling of a lot of countries who are happy that they can have a toehold in Vietnam, do business there. And so the stories that come out of Vietnam at a governmental level and at a corporate level, it tend to be very positive. The Vietnamese workforce is considered to be quite reliable, hardworking, and dependable. A lot of things are exported from Vietnam. And that's a whole separate narrative and world that is allowing the Communist Party to survive in power. And that I just wanted to point out, it's not just bloggers and activists against the party. There's a third element, and that's huge amounts of foreign investment and state investment in Vietnam that is pretty happy with the status quo. Now, the day after the country becomes unstable, they'll be very unhappy with the status quo, and they could be agents for change.
Excellent
I would
point
actually
made by Brad.
amend that. I think,
And I'm going to let you be the
Yeah,
last word because we're
sure.
almost out of time.
Sure.
Go ahead, Dan.
I think most people in Vietnam, especially the expats, especially business people, see the reality and they're not satisfied with the government. They know it's corrupt, they know it's bad, but they see the tremendous potential of the country. So they're willing to overlook that and tolerate that. I think that's true in terms of Vietnamese society. I think people want change. It's risky, and that's the hurdle, but people aren't satisfied with the government.
The last word is from Dan Huang. You also heard from An Chi and Nancy Nguyen and Brad Adams. Our community as well as part of this conversation. This is Major General with his final thoughts. He says, massive respect to your guests, the activists who against all odds are fighting for democracy in their country. So a big thank you to our community and to our guests for joining us on the show today. As always, we'll see you online.